Hey guys, tonight we begin at the edge of the known world, or, at least, that's what it must have felt like to the exhausted guards posted along the Great Wall of China. You're standing here now too, under the weight of centuries and an actual leather satchel that smells faintly of pickled radish. The air is thin, crisp, and filled with the sleepy silence of midnight fog. Far below the wall's ragged stone spine, you hear hoofbeats, not the terrifying gallop of invaders, but the clumsy shuffle of bored, four-legged sentries who chew cud and occasionally knock over your torch bucket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint through the mist, your boots tapping softly on centuries-old bricks. You're not alone up here, though the silence plays tricks on your mind. Every now and then, a pebble rolls down the ramparts, a bird coos too loudly, or a goat, not a metaphorical one, but an actual goat, tumbles past with a sleepy grunt. This is not the heroic frontier you were expecting. The wall is long, uneven, and absolutely not designed for comfort. Yet here you are, walking in the footsteps of those who were paid in millet and boiled cabbage to guard something most invaders were frankly too tired to climb. This section of the wall dates back to the Ming Dynasty, when bricks and tiles were finally introduced instead of rough-packed earth. You admire the structure, it's impressive. Not fall asleep from awe impressive, but definitely my feet hurt already impressive. The masonry is tight, the steps steep, and the lookout towers are spaced just far enough apart to make you question whether you really saw someone in the distance. Or just a goat, again. And that's the thing. The Great Wall, romanticized as a mighty defense line, often functioned more as a dull outpost for underpaid soldiers, dusty messengers, and yes, goats that were more reliable than some recruits. It's not that the wall didn't serve a purpose, it did. But it was also extremely long, often poorly manned, and full of long stretches where nothing happened except time and hoof sounds. You reach a tower, the roof is tiled, and the wood beams groan when you push open the door. Inside, a tiny fire sputters low in a corner hearth. A soldier nods, without looking up, from a game of carved bone dice. He's bundled in layers, but his nose is red, and he looks like he'd trade his spear for a warm cup of tea. The room smells faintly of cabbage stew and wet socks. He gestures toward a sleeping mat, motioning for you to sit. Nothing tonight, he mutters. Not even a bird fight. You get the feeling that's a genuine disappointment around here. You settle in, wrapping your cloak around your legs, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the wall. Somewhere out there, miles of stone crawl across the hills like the spine of a buried dragon. You expect to feel awe, but mostly, you just feel sleepy, and maybe a little itchy. It turns out, boredom was one of the wall's fiercest opponents. Historians still argue whether the lack of consistent military threats meant the wall was strategically brilliant or just massively overbuilt. Either way, the soldiers had to cope. Some took up poetry. Others brewed questionable alcohol from leftover rice. A few trained goats to bleat at unfamiliar noises, which is either genius or desperation, depending on your outlook. You stretch out your legs, toes tingling from the cold. The soldier across from you picks up a sleeping baby goat and sets it gently on his lap. Best lookout in the unit, he jokes, stroking its ears. You believe him. Outside, the mist is lifting slightly, revealing silhouettes of trees and ridges. You walk back out to the parapet. Below you, fields lie dark and undisturbed. The moonlight glances off the brickwork, painting silver shadows that shift like stories long forgotten. Your fingers run along a carved groove in the stone. A name, maybe, or a date. The wall carries memories etched by bored hands, soldiers marking time, years, losses. Some stones have actual tally marks, as if keeping count of how many days until the next supply run, or until the next letter from home, or just how many goats have slipped on these stairs. You smile at the thought, not because it's funny, but because it's deeply human. A place this vast, meant to be a boundary of civilization, ended up being something far more mundane. A place of watchfulness, but also waiting. Of duty wrapped in repetition. Of walls that kept more boredom in than enemies out. A sudden gust lifts your scarf. You catch it, then pause because you see someone moving at the next tower. But no alarm is raised. No horns. Just a man with a lantern and a goat trailing behind him, both of them waddling through another night on the wall. You watch as they disappear into the gray. Then you turn back toward your own tower, feeling the ache of centuries settling into your bones. There's nothing left to do for now but lie down on the mat, close your eyes, and listen to the gentle rhythm of history repeating itself in the quietest, most uneventful way possible. Somewhere, a goat sneezes. The soldier snores, and you, somewhere between centuries and dreams, drift deeper into the silence of stone. You wake to the sound of a pot clanking, followed by a grunt and what might be someone cursing in very old Mandarin Nor, possibly just complaining about burnt rice again. Morning on the wall isn't much different from night, except now everything is slightly brighter and colder. You rub your face with your sleeve, stiff from sleep and slightly damp from the fog that never quite leaves. Across the small room, the same soldier from last night is scooping something thick and grayish from a pot into wooden bowls. You're pretty sure it's breakfast. You're also pretty sure it's the same thing they had last night and the night before that. You pick up the bowl and give it a cautious sniff. It smells like rice, onions, and defeat. But it's warm, and your hands are cold, so you take a bite and pretend to enjoy it. The soldier gives you a tired nod and motions toward the stairs. Today's patrol is starting soon. Your legs ache as you climb back up to the top of the wall, the stones still slick with morning dew. You look out over the landscape and try to imagine the ancient call to duty. But all you can really feel is the ache in your knees and a weird pressure in your left boot, which turns out to be a pebble or possibly a petrified bean from last week's rations. As you begin the patrol, you think about how this wall, in its Ming Dynasty form, stretches thousands of miles. Most of it was built between the 14th and 17th centuries, a feat of organization, ambition, and stubbornness. The builders used stone and kill-fired bricks, with lime mortars so strong that parts of it still haven't budged. But here's the boring twist. For all the grandeur and sheer length, the majority of soldiers stationed here rarely saw action. Instead, they walked, back and forth, back again, watching hills that rarely moved and waiting for enemy shadows that mostly never came. The reality was blistered feet, torn boots, and watch rotations so dull you'd swear time itself slowed down just to mess with you. You pass another soldier who's leaned against the wall, chewing something that might be dried yam. His eyes are half closed, but he still nods and grumbles. Keep an eye out for anything unusual. You nod back, though you both know the most unusual thing seen all month was when a goat headbutted a torch stand and briefly lit its tail on fire. Further down the wall, your patrol group is joined by a third man and his goat who, based on its tiny cloth helmet, has been unofficially promoted. The goat trots along like it owns the place, occasionally stopping to munch on the lichen that grows in the cracks between bricks. Its bell jingles faintly. According to one of the guards, goats were surprisingly good at picking up vibrations or disturbances in the ground. Historians still argue whether this was practical defense, or just rural improvisation at its finest. At the next guard post, you stop for a rest. The interior is dim, with maps tacked to the wall and a few rusty spears propped in the corner. You sit on a bench that feels like it was carved from a pile of regrets. One of the guards shows you his feet trough swollen and wrapped in linen that hasn't seen soap since last summer. He laughs about it, but it's not exactly joyful. Just another day in the army. To break the monotony, some soldiers brought instruments. One strums a sanction. It's 3 strings out of tune, but oddly calming. Another hums a tune, while tossing a peach pit between his hands. They sing quietly about missing home, good wine, and how the wall stretches longer than a mother-in-law's complaints. You laugh just a little, but behind the jokes, there's a quiet heaviness. These men didn't sign up for glory. Many were conscripted. Others punished with wall duty for minor crimes like tax evasion or sarcasm toward officials. Once here, they were stuck, often for years, far from family, warmth, or even decent food. The walls they patrolled kept more in than out hunger, boredom, and loneliness clinging like frost. As the sun rises higher, you set off again. The patrol continues, step after echoing step. Occasionally, you see animal tracks, foxes, or maybe wolves. Once, there's a broken arrow stuck between bricks, old and weathered. It's a leftover from some forgotten skirmish, and no one knows who fired it. You stop to fix a loose brick, an act that's been repeated countless times. The wall was always crumbling in some places. Maintenance was constant. Workers some paid, some coerced hauled bricks up impossible cliffs. It's said that during construction, laborers mixed sticky rice into the mortar to help bind the stones. It sounds like a myth, but tests actually back it up. That ancient rice mortar helped keep sections of the wall standing for centuries. So there you have it, breakfast and bricks, all in one. A guard points toward the horizon, where the hills blur into a haze. There used to be a village there, he says. Long gone now. The wind took it. It's poetic, until you realize he might just mean a sandstorm. You nod anyway. Everything here feels like it's slowly being erased by time, and maybe that's okay. You reach the end of your patrol loop. A small tower with a lantern and a bowl of dried apricots sits like a checkpoint for the soul. You munch on a few there, hard as rocks but vaguely sweet. You sit for a moment, leaning back against the cool stone. A fly buzzes by. A goat bleats in the distance. There is, again, nothing to report. No Mongols, no bandits, no suspicious noises other than your stomach. but that's the job. And in a weird way, you start to get it. This wall wasn't just a defense, it was a way to keep people busy, keep them in motion. Maybe not safe, maybe not happy, but occupied. Because idle hands, as they say, tend to dig under walls rather than walk on them. You exhale slowly. Clouds drift across the sky. The goat finally sits down beside you, chewing loudly, unbothered by history. You scratch its ears, and for a brief second, it feels like maybe you're both patrolling something bigger than just stones and wind. Something older, quieter, and very, very sleepy. You're back on your feet again, because that's what patrol duty demands, even when your knees creak like ancient hinges and your stomach is doing interpretive dance in protest of breakfast. The goat, still loyally pacing alongside you like an oddly shaped four-legged shadow, sniffs the air and lets out a low grunt. Probably nothing. Probably another bird, or wind, or just the goat's opinion on lunch. You trudge past a crumbling step and make a mental note not to trip there on the way back. Every uneven brick seems to whisper, someone fell here once and blamed the goat. And it wouldn't be surprising these stones, walked by thousands over hundreds of years, have collected more than dirt. They've soaked in boredom, stories, jokes, and a lot of stubborn footsteps. A soldier falls in beside you. He's younger than the rest and seems marginally more awake, though his hair looks like it's been combed by a storm. Packed lunch, he asks, hopefully. You nod and hand him a roll of something bread-like. He pulls out a waxy banana, which is both a surprise and a miracle, and you both sit for a moment on a chunk of fallen stone, staring out across the nothingness. The view from the wall is stunning, but in the way a paused TV screen is stunning. It doesn't move, it doesn't change. It's just miles and miles of hills, valleys, and the occasional bird that seems way too smug for its size. There's beauty, sure, but also a kind of silent mockery in how peaceful everything is when you're expected to be on high alert. You chew your food slowly, your jaw moving in time with your thoughts. Back in the Ming era, these packed lunches were rarely packed well. Dried beans, salted turnip, flatbread if you were lucky, fresh fruit, rare meat. Dream on. So it makes perfect sense that goats were not just fellow sentries, but also accidental suppliers of milk, occasional stew material, and heat in winter, if they liked you enough to sleep nearby. You resume your walk. The path curves ahead, rising slightly toward a squat tower with a crooked roof. You hear snoring, loud, heroic snoring. One of the older guards has taken his midday nap early, leaning against his spear like it's a pillow of honor. You step carefully past, not wanting to wake the man or his pet chicken, who is somehow perched on his shoulder like it belongs there. Inside the tower, the routine continues. A small brazier is lit, and someone's warming tea that smells faintly of burnt ginger and sadness. On the wall hangs a crude calendar made from notched bamboo sticks, marking off days in red ink. Someone's carved a goat onto it wearing a helmet. Underneath it reads, Commander Ba. You grin. You weren't the first one to notice how uselessly useful the goats were. During uneventful weeks, some troops trained them not for battle, but for companionship and minor tricks. One famously learned to headbutt anyone who tried to nap during patrol. Another was rumored to scream when someone lied, though that goat might have just had a dramatic personality. Historians still argue, You remember from a documentary voice in your head, whether livestock were a formal part of wall life, or just tolerated with increasing resignation. Either way, they stayed. And after a while, they started to blend into the rhythm. Eat, walk, sleep. Repeat with the occasional bleat to punctuate the silence. Your fellow guards are starting to swap stories. One claims he saw bandits last week. The others nod solemnly, then remind him that what he saw was just a traveling opera troupe who got lost. Another insists there's treasure buried beneath Tower 31, left behind by a corrupt official who hid tax silver during a sandstorm. You pretend to believe them. It passes the time. Lunch is officially over when a bell sounds more of a clanging triangle, really announcing the rotation change. You're sent to the western-facing wall now, where the wind is stronger, the stairs steeper, and the goat more reluctant. You pull gently on its rope, and it stares at you with the weary gaze of a creature who's done this all before and will do it again forever. This part of the wall has older bricks. Some are cracked, some have been patched. One has a perfect outline of a hand, maybe pressed in wet mortar centuries ago. You pause to touch it, your fingers lining up almost perfectly. Someone was here, just like you, guarding nothing, eating boiled leaves, watching goats headbutt buckets. You reach the end of the path. There's a tiny shaded spot beneath a crooked pine tree, barely growing from a ledge. You sit again, the stone still warm from sunlight. The goat nestles beside you. Below, in the valley, a caravan creeps along a distant trail, too far to be a threat, too slow to be interesting. You watch it anyway. The silence stretches. Occasionally, wind whistles through the gaps in the stone. It sounds a bit like whimpering, but maybe that's just your mind playing tricks. You think about how no one ever writes poems about the middle of the day on the wall. It's always sunsets and storms, dragon myths and daring escapes. But this, the chewing, the slow walks, the waiting is most of what it really was. And then, your goat sneezes. A tiny, adorable sneeze. You both look at each other. No enemies in sight. Just another few hours of the same routine ahead. And, somehow, that's okay. It's not exciting, but it's peaceful. Sort of. If you ignore the flatulence, you lean your head back against the wall, letting your eyes drift closed for just a moment. A brief nap. You'll patrol again soon. You'll count arrows. You'll pretend to check for cracks. You'll feed the goat. And later, you'll trade stories with the others about a phantom rider that probably never existed, but might as well have. And when the rotation ends, you'll walk the same path in reverse. Same goat, same boots, same bricks, and somehow, it still feels like history. The goat bleats again, but not like before. This time, it's sharp urgent even. You jerk awake, wiping a line of drool from your chin and blinking against the dappled afternoon light. The pine tree's shadow has shifted. Somewhere in the haze, a bell clangs 3 times from a nearby tower. You look toward the horizon expecting something. Smoke, riders, dust trails, but no. It's the same caravan from earlier, still meandering through the low hills like a confused parade. The bell clang wasn't for war, it was for dinner rotation. Your goat looks at you, unimpressed. You rise with a groan and begin heading down the inner stairs, following the scent of boiled cabbage and wait. Is that fermented bean curd, wafting through the ancient stone corridor. but you're intercepted by a strange sound echoing from Tower 8. It's rhythmic, metallic, and suspiciously in time with goat hooves. You follow it, walking quickly across the uneven floor, until you find the source. 2 soldiers standing deadpan, while a goat in a leather collar repeatedly kicks a suspended pan. One of them sips tea without breaking eye contact. "She's the alert system now," he says flatly. "More consistent than Jew?" He gestures to the man beside him, who is currently asleep standing up. You blink. "Seriously?" The man nods solemnly. "She kicks the pan if she hears anything unusual, or smells dried fish." He shrugs. "Either way, it gets us moving." You try not to laugh, but the absurdity curls up warmly inside your chest. You've read about ancient signal systems on the wall flags during daylight, fire at night, and smoke patterns in emergencies. But goats? That part, somehow, never made it into textbooks. Still, there's precedent. Historians still argue whether non-human signal systems were a regional improvisation or a sign of sheer logistical despair. One scroll allegedly records a border captain petitioning to formally enlist goats into warning ranks. The response? Use discretion, but don't feed them from the military pantry. You step back out into the sunlight, the goat now following you again, like a stubborn cloud. You can't help but picture ancient generals around a table, arguing about signal flares while a goat eats the map. And maybe that's closer to the truth than we think. Sometimes, history T. Grand just deeply weird. Along the southern wall, you spot another group of soldiers replacing a flagpole. The wind tore the last one down during last week's thunderstorm, which was more dramatic than anything the Mongols managed in the past 5 years. You watch as one man nearly falls into a rain barrel trying to untangle a line of colored fabric. His partner mutters something about getting the goat to do it next time. There was a certain beauty in the chaos. The Great Wall wasn't was a patchwork. A string of forts and towers, each run with slightly different rules, depending on who was stationed there and how much they cared. Some commanders insisted on hour-by-hour drills. Others mostly just managed dinner rosters and goat rotations. As you walk past one barrack, a group of guards are sitting in a circle, holding what looks like a training session, except instead of spears, they're holding carrots, and instead of facing each other, they're trying to get a very grumpy goat to walk in a straight line. You slow down, watch for a moment. One soldier sees you and says, "Drill, exercise. Emergency goat maneuvers." You nod, pretending this is completely normal. Which, at this point, it kind of is. It makes a weird sort of sense. When you're stationed at one of the quietest military posts in history, you find new ways to stay alert, or distracted, or mildly entertained. Some soldiers carved poetry into bricks. Others sculpted miniature walls out of leftover rice. One reportedly taught a magpie to recite names from the night rosterant. It started swearing and had to be reassigned to another fort. You step into the next tower, where another shift is preparing for nightfall. Oil lamps are being filled. Dried herbs are hung from hooks to deter bugs. A goat sniffs around, looking for rice or revenge. A soldier is painting something on the wall with a brush and ink. You get closer. It's a diagram, a communication chart. There are arrows pointing from one tower to another, symbols for flags, smoke bells, and one labeled GB, Hue. Ask what it means, he grins. Goat bleat. 2 bleats equals unusual movement. 3 equals dinner delivery. 1 equals false alarm. Or goat stepped on a stick. You nod solemnly. Comprehensive. The man beams. She's very reliable. Outside, dusk begins to stain the edges of the sky. The air cools. Shadows stretch along the wall, turning ordinary rocks into lurking beasts and your own cloak into something slightly haunted. The goat follows you up the narrow stairs to the highest watch point. From here, you can see multiple towers in either direction, each tiny world of odd routines and localized genius. You watch a puff of smoke rise lazily from one far-off post. A single, short signal, nothing urgent. Maybe a weather report. Maybe a goat did something funny. The wall isn't a machine, it's more like a murmuring line of villages, stitched together by stone and sleep deprivation. And then, somewhere nearby, the goat bleats, loud, sharp. You freeze, heart skipping. The soldier next to you stands, that was a real one. You both stare into the darkening valley. Nothing moves. No riders, no sounds. Just wind, and yet another bleat. The goat nudges the pan. The pan wobbles. You light the signal torch just in case. Minutes pass. Then another tower answers. Not with fire, but with a goat bleat echoing through the dusk. And then silence again. No enemies. No invasion. Just a brief ripple across the wall, a shared nervous tick passed along by the world's oddest warning system. And then everyone returns to what they were doing. You sit back down, heart slower now, grateful, and slightly amused. You scratch the goat's head. Good girl. She snorts. Dinner bell rings. Again. You rise. Joints aching, stomach rumbling. Your goat leads the way down the stairs. You follow. Another night on the wall. Another day survived. By you, and by the goats who might just be better at this than anyone. You descend the stone steps slowly, your knees muttering quiet threats with every creak. The goat trots ahead like it owns the place, tail swishing side to side in what you're pretty sure is a taunt. It pauses near a cracked brick and looks back at you, as if to say, "Come on, slowpoke." You follow, because what else is there to do? The shift is over, and now it's time for dinner and, more importantly, for your nightly moment of existential dread over what exactly is in the stew. The dining area, if you can call it that, is a drafty side room with uneven benches and a pot that's been boiling something murky for the last 4 hours. The smell is complex. Something between boiled cabbage, dirt, and memories you'd rather repress. You grab a bowl and wait. Your turn behind 2 soldiers arguing about how many arrowheads they have left in the armory. 162. One says, "Impossible." The other grunts. "We had 165 yesterday. Exactly, but I gave 3 to the guy in Tower 12. The first one groans. Again he throws them into the gorge for fun. You inch forward, cradling your bowl, trying not to think about projectile shortages. Instead, you focus on the wall behind the stew pot. Carved into the soot-blackened stone is a chart. A very sad chart. It lists the wall's worst jobs. And it's not satire. You look closer. 1. Latrine shoveler rotated weekly, but mentally. Scarring forever. 2. Torch refill boy permanent oil stains. Flammable sleeves. 3. Arrow counter disputed math. Blamed for every miscount 4. Message relay runner gets lost. Sometimes replaced by goats 5. Goat sweeper, self-explanatory, you. Sigh. It's not just grim, it's honest. Someone, long ago, decided to record the reality behind the grandeur. The Great Wall, while monumental in construction and scale, was held together not just by stone and mortar, but by thankless rolls filled by very tired men and goats. Always the goats. You find a seat beside a soldier with gray in his beard and a mild twitch in his left eye. He nods and gestures toward your stew. Don't ask what's in it, it's better that way. You eat in silence for a while. The stew tastes like warm gravel with occasional hints of carrot. Every now and then, your teeth meet resistance, and you just chew through it. The room echoes with quiet conversation, and one particularly aggressive burp from a nearby goat across the table. A young man is trying to fold laundry while seated. You notice that he's wearing 2 left shoes. You raise an eyebrow. They sent the wrong supply cart again, he explains. Logistics on the wall, an eternal mystery, according to one old scroll found in a forgotten storeroom. At least 3 sections of the wall went an entire winter with only 1 ladle between them. Another report claims a shipment of helmets arrived, all 3 sizes too small. And one legendary tale tells of a shipment of pants delivered to the wrong tower and never seen again. Some believe the goats took them. Others blame bandits with unusual priorities. Historians still argue whether these logistical nightmares were due to poor planning or corruption. Either way, it meant that soldiers often had to make do. Helmets were shared, belts fashioned from rope, and when boots wore out, some guards stuffed cloth and straw into old shoes until they resembled swampy mittens for feet. You remember hearing once that parts of the wall were manned more for show than defense, that the presence of guards was symbolic, intended to project power more than wield it. Looking around at the sleepy eyes, mismatched uniforms, and goat who just knocked over a water bucket, you realize maybe that wasn't entirely untrue. Still, there's a strange sort of comfort here. Everyone knows their job, even if the job is awful. After dinner, you're assigned light duty, helping the quartermaster count supplies. It sounds simple. It's not. You enter the storeroom, where shelves sag under the weight of mismatched objects. One barrel is labeled turnip or rocks, in large brushstrokes. Another reads, "Do not open ever," which of course makes it impossible to resist. You shake it, something slitches, you put it back. The quartermaster hands you a list and a candle. Start with arrows. Of course, you kneel and begin counting, carefully stacking them in bundles. The goat follows you in and starts sniffing a crate of boots. One of the soldiers wanders by and suggests counting those 2 just in case the goat moved them again. "I think she's hoarding supplies," he adds casually. It's hard to argue. She certainly walks around with the confidence of a supply sergeant. You hear rumors she once stole a scroll from the tower clerk and refused to return it until bribed with dried apples. You finish counting arrows 162. You write it down with a proud flourish. You are now officially part of an ancient chain of confused mathematicians who never got it quite right. Back in your sleeping quarters, the straw mat seems thinner than it did last night. Maybe the goat borrowed some for a nest. You lie down anyway, pulling your thin blanket over your knees. The room is quiet, save for the gentle crunching of hay and the occasional snore. As you close your eyes, you think again about the jobs no one wanted, the drudgery, the repetition, but also the camaraderie, the odd rituals, the way someone always had a joke about the stew or a name for the latest goat recruit. You realize that the wall wasn't just a monument to defense, it was a monument to endurance, to doing the job no one sees, so quietly and so consistently that even history forgets the names behind it. You smile faintly. Somewhere near your feet, the goat sighs and settles in, the torch dims, the wind softens, the wall holds steady. The goat wakes you before the sun does again. This time not with a bleat, but by stepping directly on your ankle while investigating an empty rice bowl. You groan, stretch, and debate briefly whether to go back to sleep forever. But duty calls, or rather, the bell does. A dull, tired clang from Tower 11 signals the start of another day on the wall. You brush straw from your hair and follow the smell of weak tea and burnt rice to the main corridor, where several guards are already gearing up. You pass a man who looks like he hasn't blinked since the last dynasty. He's sipping tea from a chipped bowl and muttering to himself, "Bandits today. I can feel it." He says this every day. You move outside into the cold morning air, adjusting your cloak as the wind skims across the ridges. The wall stretches endlessly in both directions, still beautiful, still exhausting. You join a small patrol, the same as yesterday's and the day before. You recognize the pace, the jokes, the order in which people pretend to care. Today's assignment: investigate a report of suspicious movement near Tower 9. The informant, a messenger boy who also happens to sell radishes and, according to him, interpret goat behavior. You start walking. It takes nearly an hour to reach Tower 9. On the way, you pass a scribe carrying a bundle of scrolls, shouting something about urgent documentation of turnip inventory. No one listens. One guard waves lazily. A chicken runs across the path like it's being chased by history itself. At Tower 9, the captain is napping. Again, the suspicious movement turned out to be a falling basket of grain knocked over by wind, or a goat. The goat in question is staring innocently into the distance. Licking a rock, you sigh. Still, the captain insists on following protocol, which involves pretending to investigate. So, you and two other guards descend from the tower and trek through the dust and shrubs surrounding the wall. Your boots sink slightly into the dried earth. You poke a few bushes. You squint into the sun. Anything. One of the men calls. You shrug. Just dirt. Suspicious dirt, possibly. You all agree to mark it in the log as you make your way back. The conversation turns to tea, specifically the time someone brewed it using ditch water by mistake. One soldier claims it gave him visions of his ancestors. Another insists it made the goat speak fluent curses. You arrive back at the tower, dusty and unchanged. A scroll is waiting for you. It's barely readable. Someone's child clearly wrote it, but it officially instructs your team to remain vigilant for further wind-related grain incidents. You add it to the growing stack of official nonsense piling up in the corner. This is a common theme. Bureaucracy on the wall was as endless as the structure itself. Reports, logs, Supply records half of them invented to make someone in a city office feel productive. Historians still argue whether these documents were primarily for control or for theater. But they do agree that at one point, a commander was demoted for filing his goat's bleats as unauthorized alerts. Later that afternoon, there's another scare. A distant rumbling echoes off the mountains. You and a group of guards rush to the parapet, squinting into the horizon. Dust rises in the valley, a stampede, an army. You grab the signal torch, heart pounding, but no, it's a herd of wild horses, galloping nowhere in particular, their manes catching the sunlight in a way that makes them look far more dramatic than they actually are. The horses vanish just as quickly as they appeared, leaving nothing behind but silence and a mild adrenaline crash. The signal torch remains unlit. One of the soldiers sighs and goes back to his unfinished turnip. Another mutters about how you should have lit it anyway, just for fun. The captain, finally awake, asks whether it was serious. You tell him it was about as serious as a noodle shortage. He nods gravely and records it as a tear to rumbling concern. Evening arrives with the usual routine. You return to your tower, the light golden across the rooftops. Someone is playing a reed flute badly. A goat is chewing on a sandal. You sit on the steps and let the wind play with your hair. Dinner tonight is tea egg and mystery broth. The egg is actually pretty good. The broth is warm. You don't ask questions. You eat slowly, savoring the rare moment of semi-silence. One of the guards tells a story about a Mongol scout they once captured, who turned out to be a drunk shepherd from the next province. They gave him stew, and he stayed 3 weeks to fix broken roof tiles. Eventually, he left, saying he liked their goat but missed his pigs. You all nod. Sounds about right. You fall into bed early, exhausted by how little happened. The goat curls near your feet again, her soft breathing matching yours. Through the cracks in the tower window, you see stars beginning to pierce the sky. Today was uneventful, but somehow, you feel part of something bigger than you, older than any one person. The wall itself might be quiet, but it remembers everything. Every grain accident, every false alarm, every goat that ever fell asleep on a sentry's lap. You close your eyes. The wall creaks, the wind hums, and the goat reliable as ever snores. The dream is strange, as usual. You're walking the wall alone, but it stretches and bends like soft clay under your feet. The towers twist into tree trunks. The goats wear armor. One of them speaks in fluent Mandarin and accuses you of stealing its helmet. You wake up just before sentencing. The morning is thick with fog, clinging to your lashes and eyebrows, making the world feel like you're stuck inside someone's damp memory. You rise slowly, blanket tangled around your legs, and notice that your goat is already gone, probably chasing the radish vendor again. You pull on your boots, which are still damp, and head to roll call. The captain yawns through the names. Several men answer for others who are still asleep. One soldier raises his hand twice for himself and his goat. No one questions it. Today's assignment is a big one. Escort a supply cart along the wall to the next tower. The cart contains several crates of dried beans, a stack of uniforms all in size extra unpredictable, and 3 kegs of rice wine marked medicinal use only in suspiciously large brushstrokes. You and 2 others are picked for the job. You were chosen, allegedly, because you're the only ones who haven't dropped a keg this month. You suspect it's more because the captain just likes saying your goat's name, Lieutenant Pickles. The cart is ancient. One wheel is suspiciously wobbly, and the axle groans with every bump. You each take turns pushing while Lieutenant Pickles supervises from the top of a bean crate, tail twitching. The terrain is unforgiving: cobbled steps, steep inclines, random bricks dislodged by centuries of frost, and goats with bad attitudes. As you move, the sun burns off some of the fog, revealing distant peaks and valleys below. From up here, the wall truly looks like the spine of a sleeping beast, winding its way across the earth, ancient and tired. You touch one of the bricks absently, feeling the grooves where someone long before you carved their name. 3 characters, softened by time. Historians still argue. One of your companions says casually, if this part of the wall was ever actually completed, or if we've just been repairing it since the Ming. You nod. It would explain the constant patches, the uneven heights, and the bizarre corner where someone clearly ran out of stone and just used wood. Halfway through the journey, you stop at an unoccupied tower to rest. The inside is cold and smells faintly of goat. You wonder if Pickles has a second family here. The supply crates are stacked in the corner. One of your companions uncorks a keg just to check the seal, and the resulting vapor singes your eyebrows from 5 feet away. You don't ask questions. You eat a quick lunch: dried yam, leftover rice, and a hard-boiled egg that may predate the current dynasty. The conversation turns philosophical, as it often does when chewing becomes too difficult. Do you think the wall was worth it? One soldier asks. All this stone, this time, just to keep people out. You shrugged. Depends. Who you ask. Might have been just as much about keeping people in. The man nods thoughtfully. Pickles burps. When you reach the next tower, the guards greet you like returning heroes. Not because of the beans, not because of the uniforms, but because of the kegs. One soldier nearly cries when he sees them. Another kisses the top of the lid and whispers, "Bless the quartermaster." As the cart is unloaded, a small ceremony breaks out, entirely unofficial. Someone produces a flute. Another performs an interpretive goat dance. You're handed a cup of the medicinal wine, and though it burns worse than boiled vinegar, it's oddly comforting. Warmth in the cold. Laughter in the gray. Even Pickles gets a snack and an honorary medal fashioned from a tin spoon. Later, you sit on the wall and look down at the valleys bathed in amber twilight. The wall stretches in both directions like it always does, yielding, poetic, exhausting. Somewhere far off, you see a thin trail of smoke from a cooking fire. Someone else, in another tower, living a nearly identical day. You wonder if they have a goat to dot this, you think, is the real wall. Not the battles. Not the history books. But this moment. 3 guards, a goat, and a supply cart with a wobble in its wheel. The repetition is the point, the quiet. The ritual of keeping something going, not for glory, but because someone has to. The evening. Wind whistles around you. Below, a fox darts between rocks, unseen by most. A single bird calls out, its echo bouncing from stone to stone like a forgotten name. And somewhere behind you, Pickles has found a sock and is chewing it with deep concentration. You stand. Your shift ends soon. Tomorrow will bring another walk, another stew, another broken wheel. But for tonight, the wall holds steady. And so do you. You're back in your tower now, boots off. One sock, missing, presumably eaten by Lieutenant Pickles, who is currently asleep with his head resting in your bowl of turnip peelings. The fire crackles gently in the brazier, casting soft orange shadows on the rough stone walls. Outside, the night deepens. You hear the occasional low whistle from the wind funneling between crenellations, like the wall itself is muttering old stories it's too tired to finish. Your shift is over, but sleep doesn't come easily tonight. You sit by the window slit and stare into the blackness, eyes scanning for movement more from habit than hope. There's nothing out there, just stars, quiet hills, and the faint twinkle of torches from a distant tower, flashing the all-clear dot. It's been weeks since anything actually happened. The last true scare was just a runaway cow mistaken for a Mongol scout. The cow was eventually caught, fed, and named after one of the generals. It still lives near Tower 17, reportedly wearing a ceremonial saddle and a bell taken from the armory's goat supplies taught tonight. You're reflecting on how long you've been here. The days blur together, but your body keeps track. You've grown stronger, sure, but also more resigned. You walk the same paths, hear the same jokes, endure the same stew. And yet, there's something about the rhythm of it all. Something oddly calming. Someone enters quietly and hands you a folded note. Orders for tomorrow. You unfold it with minimal enthusiasm, half expecting it to assign you to latrine duty again. But instead, it's something new. You are to assist with the tower census at dawn. Bring writing materials, 2 extra sets of socks, yours or otherwise, and a lantern. Report to Clerk Wang. You frown. A census. Of what? Soldiers' supplies. Goats. Probably goats. You wake early the next morning, feeling only slightly betrayed by your own body for cooperating. Outside, a fine mist curls around the towers. It's cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your joints and makes your breath look more impressive than it feels. You find Clerk Wang where expected, at a tiny desk crammed into the corner of a storage room that smells like mildew, ink, and quiet desperation. He's already scribbling furiously onto a scroll, eyes red-rimmed, hands covered in smudges. Ah, he says without looking up. You're the one with the goat. Good. We need someone with livestock experience. You open your mouth to argue, but decide against it. You pull up a crate and sit beside him. He hands you a stack of forms. We're starting with livestock, then weapons, then human heads. You freeze. Head counts, he says quickly. Not actual ... You know. He clears his throat. That came out wrong. You begin with goats. There are 12 in your tower's range. 13, if you count the one who only shows up on Tuesdays. Each has a name, a rank mostly honorary, and at least one misconduct report. Lieutenant Pickles has 4. One of them involves a missing ration crate. Another, a defaced map. Next are weapons. Spears, arrows, bows mostly accounted for. Some were lost to wind. Others loaned indefinitely to neighboring towers. A few are listed simply as misplaced during celebratory activities, which you don't ask about. Finally, the soldiers' 37 names. You tick them off one by one, watching them pass through the tower chamber. Some still half asleep, others clearly trying to look more injured than they are to get reassigned to stew duty. Clerk Wang marks each with a sigh, occasionally adding a symbol that looks suspiciously like a goat hoofprint. Historians still argue. He mutters whether these tower records were used for strategy or just bureaucratic punishment. You nod. It seems likely that both are true. By noon, your fingers ache from writing. The ink smells sharp and earthy, and you've spilled it on your tunic twice. Pickles has found a scroll tube, and is now wearing it like a sleeve. You eat lunch. On the parapet, your bowl of millet porridge balancing precariously on your knee. Below, 2 guards are arguing over whose turn it is to sweep the goat quarters. One is holding a broom. The other is holding a small flag that says, "Not today." You slurp your porridge slowly, thinking about how much the wall depends on tiny, ridiculous acts. Someone sweeping goat droppings. Someone fixing arrows. Someone filing a report about a stampeding chicken. These aren't the things sung about in poetry, but they're the reason the wall has stood for centuries. Later in the day, you help carry a crate of broken helmets to the blacksmith's hut. On the way, you pass the painter again, the one who drew the goat communication chart. He's added new symbols, one for stepped in something and another for don't ask. That night, the fog rolls back in. The torches are lit early. Everything feels muffled, softened by the mist. You stand watch with 3 others, your breath joining theirs in slow, sleepy plumes. Lieutenant Pickles has parked herself beside the fire, chewing on a scroll tube she definitely stole. There's a moment brief and silent when you realize how strange and beautiful this life is. It's nothing like what you were told in stories. It's stranger, smaller, quieter, but also more real. You sit down beside your goat. She leans against your leg, and you whisper into the night, just to test the silence. No answer, just the wall. Waiting, breathing, and maybe listening. The rain starts before sunrise. Not a dramatic storm, just a slow, misting drizzle that makes everything feel soggy and tired. The kind of rain that seeps into boots and eyebrows and slowly convinces your soul to give up. You wake to the sound of drops tapping against the stones like bored fingers, and the unmistakable scent of damp goat. Lieutenant Pickles, soaked and sulking, stands in the doorway. Her ears droop. Her fur sticks out in awkward directions. She looks like a small, defeated rug. You sigh and motion her inside. She enters with the indignation of royalty, forced to walk through a puddle. You're scheduled for watch duty today. Normally a dull assignment, but in the rain, it becomes an even slower brand of misery. You wrap yourself in an extra layer, grab your cloak, and head toward the parapet. Stepping carefully over the now slick stones, the wall in the rain has a different sound. Less crunch, more squish, fewer voices, more coughs. The guards move slower, wrapped in damp cloth, faces peeking out like suspicious onions. You pass Tower 6 on your way up. Someone inside is trying to dry socks by holding them over a candle. The results are mixed and briefly flammable. You reach your post and settle into position. There's no stool, of course, just cold stone, a leaking awning overhead, and the same endless view of fog-drenched valleys. Your job is to watch for movement. Bandits, smugglers, spies. What you actually see: 2 wet birds arguing over a worm and a suspiciously shaped shrub. You sip tea from a clay cup that tastes like rainwater and rust. Across the walkway, another guard is carving something into the wall with a knife. You squint. It's a tally. Dozens of little hash marks. Days without incident, he explains, without looking up. How many? You ask. Don't know. Lost count. Goat ate part of the wall. You nod. Makes sense. Historians still argue whether long stretches of peace along the wall were a sign of successful deterrence or simply proof that no one cared to invade that day. Either way, peace meant boredom. And boredom was the real enemy. Because it made you slow. It made you careless. It made you start talking to the rain. You glance down the wall. A goat walks by. Not yours. It's wearing a cloth hat and dragging a bucket. You think about asking where it's going, but decide to let it have its mystery. Mid-morning brings a sudden gust of wind, strong enough to knock over a stack of firewood and a guard asleep against the tower. The firewood recovers. The guard does not. He mumbles something about a dream where he was promoted to emperor of bean storage. You cover him with a tarp and return to your post. The fog thickens. Shapes blur. The world turns into a watercolor of gray and green. You try to focus, but your eyes keep drifting. You count bricks. You count birds. You count raindrops until you lose track somewhere around 1,010. Then, from the mist movement, you stand, squint there below. A line of figures, faint, silent. You hold your breath. They move slowly along a distant ridge, nearly blending into the rock. You light the torch. Flame hisses in the rain. Smoke rises, barely visible, against the wet air. Within moments, a torch lights on a nearby tower. Then another. The message is passed along like a yawn in a library, soft, cautious, slightly confused. Soon, several towers glow faintly through the fog. Someone's banging a gong. Your captain arrives, panting, hair wet and sticking out in heroic angles. What is it? He gasps. You point. He squints, then groans. Pilgrims, he says. Indeed, as the mist shifts, the figures clarify. A line of peaceful travelers in wide-brimmed hats, leading donkeys piled high with offerings. No weapons, no horses, no threat. You sigh. The torches die down, one by one, like embarrassed fireflies. The gong stops. The captain mutters something about false alarms and who keeps letting you near the signal torch, then wanders off to find dry socks. You resume your post, slightly wetter than before. Later, while changing shifts, you pass the lower barracks. Inside, a group of soldiers huddle around a brazier, sharing tales from different towers. One mentions a goat that climbed onto a tower roof and refused to come down for 3 days. Another tells the tale of the haunted ox cart, a supply wagon, that appears during storms, always half unloaded, its driver never seen. Someone else swears a monkey once infiltrated the wall's records room and reordered all the scrolls, alphabetically by smell. You listen quietly, sipping lukewarm tea. None of it surprises you. You retire early that evening. Your boots squish as you peel them off. The rain has not stopped. It taps gently on the stones, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby only the wall can hear. Lieutenant Pickles is already curled in your corner, snoring. You lie down beside her. Blanket over your shoulders, cloak still damp. Your bones ache. Your hands are ink-stained. You smell faintly of goat and rain, and yet, you feel content. The day was pointless, uneventful, wet, but the wall held. So did you. Tomorrow will be the same. Or different, or both. You let the thought drift away, and you sleep. The rain finally stops, sometime around dawn. Though you wouldn't call it a dramatic ending, more like the sky just forgot what it was doing, and wandered off. You wake up to damp air, puddles in your boots, and a goat trying to eat your pillow. Again, Lieutenant Pickles gives you a blank look when confronted, as if to suggest maybe you should get a pillow that doesn't taste like yam peels. You push yourself up, creaking like an old door, and notice the quiet. Not silence exactly, but something different. The usual rustle and mumbling of early morning are missing. You poke your head out the window slit. No one's on the wall. Not even that one guy who always pretends to be stretching just to avoid helping with breakfast fire duty. You wander down the stone steps, cloak still damp around the edges, and find a note pinned to the main corridor wall. Messy brushstrokes. Training day. Everyone to Tower 14. Bring weapons and goats. You stare at it for a moment. You know better than to ask questions. By the time you reach Tower 14, a modest crowd has gathered. Soldiers stand in crooked rows, yawning and shifting their weight from foot to foot. Some carry bows, some carry spears. One seems to have brought a ladle. And yes, at least 3 goats are present, including yours, who somehow got here before you and is eating someone's boot. The commander for today's training is a wiry man with wild eyebrows and a scroll tucked under one arm. He introduces himself as Sergeant Behan. No one knows where he came from, and no one asks. He begins by asking who can demonstrate proper spear form. A single hand goes up attached to a man holding a broom. Good enough, Behan says. The next hour is a series of exercises that walk the delicate line between mildly dangerous and hilariously ineffective. You're asked to simulate repelling a siege using nothing but kitchen tools. One soldier defends a doorway with a soup pot and a plank. Another tries to flank the enemy by rolling across the floor dramatically. Someone's goat joins in, apparently thinking it's a game. Then comes the archery drill. You line up behind a hay dummy fashioned to resemble an invading barbarian, complete with a painted-on scowl and a stolen scarf. Your first arrow misses entirely and hits a nearby bucket, causing a cascade of dried beans to spill across the floor. Lieutenant Pickles promptly starts eating them. Still, the atmosphere is light, even cheerful. It's rare to have a day with structured chaos instead of the usual unstructured variety. People laugh, bump into each other, and pretend not to be aiming for the hay dummy's ridiculous eyebrows. Historians still argue whether training days like this were genuinely useful or simply ceremonial. Some records suggest they boosted morale. Others imply they were just a clever excuse to keep everyone from going completely mad with boredom. One scroll from a southern tower even references a competitive goat obstacle course used to test alertness and agility. No surviving instructions remain, though one diagram does feature a very confused donkey in a helmet. As the sun rises higher, Sergeant Behan leads the group into a mock siege scenario. Teams are divided, roles are assigned. You're placed on wall defense, with orders to protect the gate, the goat, and the honor of your ancestors. You do your best. You hold a wooden shield more like a barrel lid, shout dramatic orders, and dramatically collapse when pelted with a clump of rice. Lieutenant Pickles charges the enemy lines, knocks over a helmet stand, and is declared most valuable defender. At the end of the exercise, the commander claps everyone on the back. "You defended the wall with valor," he says, "or at least with energy. That counts." The crowd disperses slowly, laughing and groaning. You help clean up, stacking wooden props and returning bent arrows. One guard collects fallen equipment and begins logging it into a scroll marked "slightly broken but recoverable." You sit in the shade of the tower, catching your breath. The air is warm now, carrying hints of spring green leaves, soft earth, sun-warmed stone. You pull out a small snack from your pouch, something pickled and mysterious, and share it with your goat. She accepts it like tribute. For a while, nothing happens. And it's perfect. Later that afternoon, as you walk back to your own tower, you notice that someone has added new chalk drawings to the inner corridor wall. They're crude but expressive stick figures defending a tower, a goat with a flag, a soldier falling dramatically into a barrel. It's clearly today's battle, retold in goat-centric art. You smile. There's something comforting about it. A kind of living history, casual, unrecorded, quietly sacred. Back in your tower, you find that someone's moved your things. Your mat is now under the window. Your blanket is missing. You suspect the goat. She's napping on a suspiciously lumpy bundle. That night, you sit on the parapet and watch the last light fade. The stars blink slowly into view. No fog, no rain, just clear, quiet sky and the soft sound of someone in the next tower playing a melancholy tune on a reed flute. You think about how this life, odd, repetitive, sometimes absurd, has settled into your bones. You've become part of the wall. Not just stationed on it, but folded into it. As essential and unnoticed as a single stone, and as you lie down, your goat beside you, the wind brushing soft across the bricks, you think, tomorrow. There might be another false alarm, or another training day, or another goat incident. Whatever it is, you'll be ready. Morning arrives, with the scent of smoke and burnt toast. Someone attempted breakfast in the communal hearth again, and it's a wonder the tower is still standing. You're roused by the clatter of boots and the unmistakable bleat of Lieutenant Pickles demanding her morning ration. Though what she really wants is an audience. Today's task is different. You've been assigned to patrol a newly built section of the wall, one of those projects that seemed to spring up overnight. The stones here are fresher, sharper, and less worn. It feels strange to walk on bricks that haven't yet absorbed centuries of goat droppings or soldiers' size. You step lightly, ears tuned for any unusual sounds. The fog is gone, replaced by a clear sky and the soft warmth of morning sun. The birdsong is louder here, less muffled by ancient stone. The fresh section was constructed during the Ming Dynasty's final push to reinforce the wall, a massive effort that employed thousands of workers. According to official records, this stretch was completed in just under 2 years, an impressive feat for such a colossal structure, of course. The records don't mention the hundreds of goats that supervised construction by wandering onto scaffolding or chewing on ropes. You walk alongside a narrow parapet, feeling the slight wobble of new mortar. The towers are taller, more refined, with better drainage and wider battlements designed to hold more soldiers and heavier weapons. It's a contrast to the older, more worn parts you've been patrolling. Halfway through your route, you spot something odd, a carved symbol etched into the stone. It looks like a goat's hoofprint, surrounded by stars. You remember seeing this in one of the crude charts the painter made, but this one is real deeply scratched into the brickwork. Maybe a signature, or a secret code. Historians still argue whether such markings were meant as territorial tags, superstitions, or simple graffiti. Whatever the case, it feels like a whisper from the past, connecting you to countless unknown soldiers and their four-legged companions. As you continue, a distant clang echoes, a signal bell, sharp and urgent. You rush toward the sound, passing a group of workers repairing a crumbling wall section. They wave and shout greetings, some carrying bundles of fresh mortar and others hauling heavy tools. When you reach the source, a small detachment of soldiers is gathered around a gatehouse. One of them gestures toward the horizon. You peer over the battlements and see a group of figures approaching. This time, there's no mistaking it. A band of horsemen, perhaps, scouts or messengers, ride swiftly along the valley below, their banners fluttering. The guards prepare, fingers on triggers and bows at the ready. You watch as the riders slow, approaching the gatehouse. A messenger dismounts and approaches with a scroll. The captain reads it silently, then nods grimly. The northern borders are restless, he announces. Reinforcements will arrive soon, but we must stay vigilant. The soldiers exchange looks, the tension palpable. You feel the weight of history pressing down the wall is not just stones and mortar, but a living line between peace and chaos. Still, despite the sudden alert, the atmosphere remains oddly calm. Soldiers prepare, but no panic breaks out. You find yourself admiring their quiet discipline, their ability to carry on, even when the unknown lurks just beyond the horizon. Later, you settle by the fire, sharing a simple meal with your comrades. The conversation drifts to old tales, the one about the watchman who fell asleep but was saved by a goat's warning bleat, or the legend of a secret passage beneath the wall that leads to an ancient treasure. Lieutenant Pickles listens attentively, occasionally grunting in what might be agreement or impatience. As night falls, you stand on the battlements again, looking out over the valley. The stars are sharp and cold above you. The wall stretches endlessly, a testament to human will, boredom, and perseverance. You feel a strange pride, mingled with exhaustion. Tomorrow, you know, the wall will still be here, and so will you. The chill of dawn settles over the wall like a faded blanket. You wake slowly, limbs stiff and joints complaining in that familiar way that only decades-old stone and cold mortar can provoke. Lieutenant Pickles is already up, circling your mat with the kind of purposeful hunger that means breakfast has officially become a non-negotiable priority. You follow the procession down to the courtyard, where the morning muster is underway. The guards stand in formation, faces pale in the weak light, eyes half shut, or already scanning the horizon. The commander addresses the group with clipped instructions about patrol shifts, food ration schedules, and an update on a recent bandit sighting somewhere miles from here, but apparently alarming enough to merit passing round. Your assignment today: escort a small caravan delivering fresh supplies to the farthest watchtower. The caravan consists of 3 carts creaking under sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat, and a crate of pottery that looks suspiciously empty, but is guarded like treasure. The caravan is also accompanied by a stray dog that everyone claims is a lucky charm, but mostly just barks at goats. As you set off, the sun peeks over the mountains, casting long shadows and bathing the wall in a golden haze. You admire the view for a moment, the ridges, the patchwork valleys, the way the wall snakes through the landscape like a dragon at rest. It's breathtaking. You remind yourself that this was built by thousands, layer by layer, stone by stone. With little more than sweat and stubbornness, the journey is slow. The carts jolt over uneven stones. The wheels creak and threaten collapse. At one point, Lieutenant Pickles decides the best way to help is by attempting to lead the caravan herself, walking ahead with the pride of a general and the grace of a toddler learning to walk. Along the way, you pass signs of life's small villages nestled in valleys, smoke rising from chimneys, farmers tending fields of millet and barley. People wave, call greetings in distant dialects, and some children dare to approach. Eyes wide with curiosity and awe, you share your water with one of the villagers, a small girl with a shy smile and dirt-smudged cheeks. She offers you a handful of wildflowers in return, which you tuck into your cloak. You think of home and how far you've traveled to stand guard on this ancient wall. The caravan reaches the tower by midday. The guards there greet you warmly, grateful for the much-needed supplies. You help unload sacks, stack barrels, and check inventory. The tower feels alive today, a small hub of movement and laughter, a stark contrast to the quiet monotony you've come to expect. That evening, you gather with the other guards for a rare celebration. The quartermaster has procured a small keg of rice wine, and though the portions are meager, the mood is generous. Stories are shared, some true, others wildly exaggerated, and you laugh harder than you have in weeks. Someone raises a toast to the wall, the goats, and the fools who guard them. You raise your cup, the warmth spreading through your fingers and chest. Lieutenant Pickles nudges your hand, clearly hoping for a snack. As the fire crackles and the stars twinkle overhead, you realize that despite the tedium, the danger, and the absurdity, this place has become a strange kind of home. You are part of something enduring, flawed, and utterly human, and that, perhaps, is enough. The dawn breaks quietly, almost shyly, as if even the sun hesitates to rouse the wall from its slumber. You awaken to the familiar bleat of Lieutenant Pickles, who seems unusually excited today, darting back and forth like she's chasing an invisible enemy, or possibly just the wind. Your assignment is a bit different now. You're to assist with the inspection of the wall's defenses. The captain wants to ensure the battlements are sturdy, the arrows are sharp, and, perhaps most importantly, that no goats have taken over the archery towers again. This has happened more than once. You join a small group, armed with tools, notes, and the kind of determination that's mostly fueled by a desire to finish quickly and get back to something that resembles rest. The walls, however, have other plans. Every step reveals a new crack, a loose brick, or a mysterious stain that no one can explain, but everyone suspects might be goat-related. As you make your way along the parapet, you notice the intricate stonework, some fresh, some centuries old, and some that seem to have been repaired by whoever was available at the time, including, you suspect, goats. The craftsmanship is impressive, but it carries the scars of age and countless repairs. At one point, you stop at a small alcove that overlooks a winding river below. The view is breathtaking, the water sparkling in the morning light, the mountains standing guard in the distance. You wonder how many generations have stood here, watching, waiting. Historians still argue whether the wall's primary purpose was defensive or symbolic, barrier against invaders or a monument to imperial power. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere in the middle. During the inspection, you come across a curious sight. A goat tangled in fishing nets near the riverbank, bleating loudly. Your companions try to free it, but the goat resists fiercely, as if it knows it's part of some cosmic joke. Eventually, with much patience and several bruised hands, the animal is freed and trots off, leaving you all wondering if it will return to report on your progress. Back on the wall, the inspection continues with less drama, but equal tedium. You check arrow supplies, polish helmets, and test the weight of various spears. One soldier demonstrates his secret move, which involves tripping over his own feet and knocking over a barrel. The group applauds politely. As the day wears on, the sun climbs higher, and the temperature rises. You find a shady spot to rest, sharing a simple meal with your comrades. Conversation drifts to legends, tales of invisible armies, ghostly sounds, and a secret tunnel rumored to run beneath the wall. Whether these stories are true or not is anyone's guess, but they keep the long hours light. Evening falls with a calm hush. The sky blushes pink and purple, and the wall stands silent, massive, and eternal. You lean against the stone, watching the stars emerge one by one. Lieutenant Pickles curls at your feet, content and snoozing. You think about tomorrow, another day of patrols, inspections, and the steady, unchanging rhythm of life on the wall. And somehow, that thought is enough to lull you into a deep, peaceful sleep. The wind carries a sharp chill as you wake to a sky painted in pale morning hues. The wall feels different today, as if it's holding its breath, waiting for something unseen. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the fabric rough but familiar, and prepare for a day of guard duty that promises to be anything but ordinary. Word has spread through the towers that a special envoy is arriving, in official from the imperial court, traveling incognito to inspect the wall's condition and the morale of its defenders. The captain is unusually nervous, pacing back and forth, fussing over details that usually go unnoticed. The neatness of the supply crates, the cleanliness of the goat quarters, even the positioning of the flagstones. You're assigned to accompany the envoy on a tour of the wall's most precarious sections. The envoy is a quiet figure, wrapped in layers of silk and mystery, eyes sharp and curious. Unlike the typical gruff soldiers, this person moves with a grace that seems almost otherworldly. As you walk, the envoy asks questions about the construction, the history, the daily life of those who serve here. You find yourself answering honestly, mixing facts with stories you've picked up over time, including the unofficial tales of goats causing more mischief than any invader. One tower has a newly installed watch bell, and you watch the envoy strike it softly, listening to the deep resonance that echoes through the valleys. It's a sound that has long signaled both warning and comfort. Along the way, you notice the delicate balance maintained between nature and human endeavor. Birds nest in crevices, wildflowers bloom between bricks, and somewhere nearby, a goat munches lazily on a tuft of grass, unbothered by the scrutiny. Historians still debate whether the Great Wall was primarily a military fortification or a symbol of imperial power. Today, walking alongside the envoy, you see evidence of both stone walls built for defense, but also carefully tended gardens, and carved inscriptions celebrating dynasty and duty. At one point, the envoy pauses at an ancient carving depicting a battle scene, worn smooth by time. You tell the story of how local legend credits a goat for alerting soldiers to a surprise attack, saving the wall from destruction. The envoy smiles, eyes twinkling with amusement. The tour ends at a quiet courtyard where soldiers gather to rest and share stories. The envoy sits among them, listening intently. You watch as the guards relax, their usual stiffness melting into laughter and camaraderie. As evening falls, you find a moment alone on the battlements. The sky is a canvas of stars, the wall stretching endlessly into the night. You think about the envoy's visit, the stories shared, and the strange, enduring life of this ancient barrier. Lieutenant Pickles appears beside you, nudging your hand. You scratch behind her ears, feeling the steady rhythm of the wall beneath your feet. In that moment, the wall feels less like a boundary, and more like a home, a place where history, myth, and everyday life intertwine. And as the night deepens, you realize that, no matter what the future holds, you are part of something timeless.